Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and I trust the week has gone well, and looking forward to the weekend, as am I. It was a treat yesterday attending a rather fancy Samsung Galaxy S5 launch at the Safari Park Hotel, which once was, was on the outskirts of Nairobi, and today feels as if it's now part of Nairobi, and it's an example of how much the city has expanded in the last few years. I put up a photograph of the entrance into the Safari Park, and on the lead there were all these advertisements as you approached it. It was really rather fancy, and it was a great party. And I'll put up a photograph of Manoj and Robert introducing the Galaxy S5 yesterday. If you haven't had a chance, do have a look at that interview I did with Beatrice regarding the first year. And I was thinking to myself, my expectations were extremely high, I think, as were a great deal of the populations. And if you haven't watched my Mind Speak session with the East African Secretary General, Dr. Richard Sesibera, please do. That link is on Richard wrap-ups as well. My home thoughts return to Garcia Marquez. And I really like this sentence. What matters in life is not what happens to you, but what you remember and how you remember it. And then I like this from Love in the Time of Cholera. To him she seemed so beautiful, so seductive, so different from ordinary people that he could not understand why no one was as disturbed as he by the clicking of her heels on the paving stones, why no one else's heart was wild with the breeze stirred by the size of her veils, why everyone did not go mad with the movements of her braid, the flight of her hands, the gold of her laughter. He had not missed a single one of her gestures, not one of the indications of her character. But he did not dare approach her for fear of destroying the spell. Political Reflections. NATO has released satellite images of the Russian military build-up on Ukraine's eastern border, showing a powerful concentration of fighter planes, helicopters, artillery, infantry, special forces, which officials say could be ready to move with just 12 hours' notice. My initial conclusions are that I do not see Putin moving to munch more, as it were, of eastern Ukraine. I think it's a game of brinkmanship and hardball, and Putin is seeking to keep Ukraine, or the new government in Ukraine, playing defense. I'll put up a photograph I found on Digital Globe of an image showing Russian Su-33 fighter planes near Ukraine's border. But a report on RT says NATO's Russian troop build-up satellite images show 2013 drills. President Putin warned on Thursday that Russian gas supplies to Europe could be disrupted if Moscow cuts the flow to Ukraine over unpaid bills, drawing a US accusation that it is using energy as a tool of coercion. In a letter to the leaders of 18 European countries, Putin made clear that his patience would run out over Kiev's $2.2 billion gas debt to Russia unless a solution could be brokered urgently. Russia has nearly doubled the gas price it charges Ukraine, whose economy is in crisis, since pro-Moscow President Viktor Yanukovych was overthrown 2 months ago. Of course, Russia then annexed Crimea. Putin said Russian exporter Gazprom would demand advance payment for gas supplies to Ukraine, and in the event of further violation of the conditions of payment will completely or partially seize gas deliveries. This could have knock-on effects for European Union countries, much of whose Russian gas flows in pipelines across Ukraine. We fully realize that this increases the risk of Ukraine siphoning off natural gas, passing through Ukraine's territory and heading to European consumers, the letter said. Russia meets 30% of Europe's natural gas demand, and half of this goes through Ukraine. I like this quote from Robert Fisk. Erdogan is like Yossarian in Catch-22, a very odd person. There are signs of political megalomania. The euro is at 138.92, and the euro is headed for its biggest weekly gain against the dollar in 6 months. Dollar index 79.42 trades poorly, sort of went and tested, rose through that resistance level and then broke down again at that resistance level that I was talking about at 80.15 to 80.18. Japanese yen 101.62, Swissy 0.8765, the pound 167.70, the Aussie 0.9369, Indian rupee 60.29, down 0.3% this week. South Korean won 1035.85. The won climbed 0.5% to close at 1035.35 in Seoul after advancing to 1031.55 yesterday. Of course, that's a 2008 high, higher since August 2008. The Rial is at 220.69. Egyptian pound 697.45, and the rand has come off that level at around 1040. It's last at 1047.98. The dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart, trades very poorly indeed. Declined 1.4% against the euro. Bloomberg spot index fallen 1.1% since April 4, set for the biggest weekly decline since the period ending August 9. Fed policymakers cut monthly bond purchases by $10 billion to $55 billion at their March 18-19 meeting. At that, subsequent to that meeting, Fed Chair Janet Yellen said the central bank may start to raise interest rates around 6 months after ending the asset buying program. And I think the market was caught off guard by the short time span that she indicated. But I think subsequently people have shifted their projections, and the minutes have helped shift them. Several participants noted that the increase in the median projection overstated the shift in the projections, according to the minutes. Some expressed concern the rate forecast could be misconstrued as indicating a move by the committee to a less accommodative reaction function, the minutes showed. Euro dollar, that's had a strong rally of 1.4% this week. I'll put up a 3-month chart of that. Dollar yen 101.62, and you remember we were just below 104 or around 104 not too long ago. The Nasdaq suffered its worst single-day drop since late 2011. The tech-heavy index sank 3.1%. The Nasdaq Biotechnology Index plunged 5.6%. Selling rippled through the broader markets. The Dow fell 1.62%. Selling spilled over into Japan, where shares fell to a 6-month low. I'll put up a 5-day chart of the Nasdaq. You can see it's quite a sharp fall. I'll put up a 1-year chart that compares the Nasdaq, the Nikkei, and the Dow Jones. And I'll put up a photograph of men reflected in a screen displaying a graph showing the movements of recent share averages outside a brokerage in Tokyo on April 11. UK house prices are going to post their biggest annual increase since 2010, a biggest gain in 3.5 years. Prices in England and Wales rose 7.2% from a year earlier. From prices in London, jumped 1%. Prices jumped 1% month on month, and I wrote about this on the 2nd of August 2013 when I said I think there's an outside chance that UK property, which was projected to rally 25% over 5 years, achieves that in 2 or 3. And I think the incline of the price increase puts my prediction into play. Gold is at 1320.755. I'll put up a 3-month chart, but I, for one, think we've already seen the 2014 high. Crude oil, much firmer, 102.09, up 1.9% this week. Prices are up 4.8% this year. I think this is a short squeeze, and I'm looking to sell it at an optimal level because when they squeeze, they can squeeze it. It could go as high as 105 for all I know. Rough diamond prices gained 10% last year, apparently, and prices have more than doubled in the past 5 years. I'll put up a photograph of the pink star Steinmetz diamond. Ai Weiwei has launched a new exhibition, but of course he's not allowed to leave Beijing. I'll put up a photograph of him. Frontier markets, I just was reading an article about dictators' wives, and I couldn't resist this photograph of Michel Duvalier leaving Haiti. And it's quite evocative, I found. The UN has approved a force for the Central African Republic. The UN Security Council on Tuesday unanimously approved a nearly 12,000 strong UN peacekeeping force for the Central African Republic, where mounting violence between Christians and Muslims has brought killings, torture, and sexual violence. 10,000 UN troops and 1,800 police will take over from 5,000 African Union soldiers, but not until September 15. A separate 2,000 strong French force, CAR, was authorized to use all necessary means to support the new UN force. In a meeting with South Sudan's Minister of the Office of the President, Awan Riak, John Kerry said, "We will not stand by while the hopes of a nation are held hostage to short-sighted and destructive actors." In 2012, when we were in the midst of the oil standoff, the oil cutoff, that was in January 2012, I wrote this. I said, there is a backstory to Sudan. You see, through 2011, Sudan provided China with 5% of its total oil imports. You will recall that 35,000 Chinese workers were evacuated out of Libya in 9 days last year, that was in 2011. And China was effectively rolled back and right out of Libya. Not so long ago, President Obama authorized the deployment to Uganda of approximately 100 combat-equipped US forces to help regional forces ostensibly to remove from the battlefield Lord's Resistance Army leader Joseph Kony. My point about that is it legitimizes US hard power on the African continent, and I think that's been proven, and that's something that they're able to use in particular to stop Chinese advance. And then I refer you back to a memorandum issued January 2012 by the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States, including Section 503A of the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961 as amended, and Section 3A1 of the Arms Export Control Act as amended. I hereby find that the furnishing of defense articles and defense services to the Republic of South Sudan will strengthen the security of the United States and promote world peace. And my point was that, I thought Sudan had become the epicenter of this US-China collision in Africa, and that in many ways we were watching a proxy war. But I conclude in the recent events is that clearly Washington is not as solidly behind Juba, by that I mean Salva, as they were when I wrote my piece. I'll put up a photograph of the Chinese President Xi Jinping meeting Al-Fatih Izaldin, Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of the Sudan, in Beijing on April 3rd. The South African All-Share Index is up 6.26%, and I believe closed at a further record high yesterday. The dollar versus rand, a little bit of a backup off that 1040 level, 1047.87. But I think given the way the dollar is trading in general, I'm expecting a move back to 10 in the rand. Woolworths, South Africa's second biggest retailer by value, aims to open 15 stores in sub-Saharan Africa, including in Kenya, Mauritius, and Namibia in the next 2 or 3 years. They already have 65 African stores in 11 countries. Egyptian pound, that's trading at 697.45. We've been here for a while. The Egyptian stock market continues to rebound, rallied 1.69% yesterday and is now up 17.3%, and the best performing stock market in Africa this year. The Nigerian All Shares down 4.54%. But the Naira rallied to its strongest level in almost 6 weeks as Nigeria's state oil company was set to sell dollars to the local market. But I think, we've had a better international backdrop, better risk appetite, of course, the Nasdaq. And I think that's encouraged buyers into equities in sub-Saharan Africa and back into Nigeria. The Ghana Stock Exchange is up 9.02% in 2014, but all those gains have been eroded by an extremely weak cedi. This quote I got from Reuters: "We are not really seeing Ghana now as the most dynamic economy on the continent," said Carlos Lopez, Executive Secretary of the UN Economic Commission for Africa. You can say that again. One of the difficulties we've had, not only this government but also the previous government, is managing the expectations of Ghanaians. President John Mahama told the Reuters Africa Summit this week the general feeling was that as soon as Ghana started pumping oil, our problems were going to be solved. They hiked the recurrent expenditure component, and I think that was a serious mistake before the income had started coming in. And I wrote on the 24th of March, the open question is whether Ghana is in the cockpit or whether the markets simply elbow the government aside. And I think I stand by that. Ghana's Eurobond has a 9% handle, and sentiment has soured so much it is entirely feasible that Ghana might print a double-digit yield. Ghana is a near perfect harbinger of what can go wrong when you front-load your recurrent expenditure in the expectation that revenues are a rising tide. The open question is whether Ghana is in the cockpit or whether the markets will simply elbow the government aside. Sad Miller's Zimbabwe affiliate reported an 18% decline in annual volume of lager beer on Thursday, hit by an economic slowdown. So that is a clear proxy of the slowdown that we've been talking about in Zimbabwe. Somalia and high-speed internet culture shock. Any video or site just pops up. They're very excited about speed, said Somalia Wireless's Liban Igal. Of course, the Al-Shabaab had issued a directive in January ordering all internet services to be stopped, saying those who did not comply would be seen as working with the enemy and dealt with according to Islamic law. Coming to Kenya, we've had some interesting developments in the mobile space. Equity has gotten a special window to enter the mobile telecoms market. 3 new service providers are expected to enter the telecoms market on Friday morning, opening a new front in the battle for control of mobile money and data that have become the fastest growing revenue streams for the 4 existing operators. The 3 operators to be licensed under a new legal regime will ride on existing operators' networks to offer select services after signing agreements with the infrastructure owners. The 3 firms to be issued with the Mobile Virtual Network Operator MVNO licenses are Finserve Africa Limited, a subsidiary of Equity Bank, Mobile Pay Limited, owned by Tangaza Money, and Zion Cell Kenya. MVNO licenses fall under the application service provider category, come with a fee of 100,000 shillings, and enables an entity to offer services such as customer registration, SIM card issuance, billing, and customer care to end users without holding a Spectrum license. This means the 3 firms will be riding on the existing infrastructure of the mobile operators at a fee to offer their services, saving them the pain of heavy capital expenditure associated with rolling out telecommunication networks, and which the regulator says will promote competition. Telkom's Kenya's CEO, Mikhail Garcia, said his company will not allow the MVNOs on its network to offer voice or data services because this would compromise the quality of services. Mr. Goshen had instead asked the CAK, Communications Authority of Kenya, to convene a stakeholders meeting before licensing the MVNOs. They've gone ahead and done just that. CAK Director General Francis Wangusi said all the 3 applicants had sought to use Airtel's network and that Telkom had nothing to worry about. Of course, the regulator last month demanded that Safaricom accept hosting the MVNOs as part of the conditions for the planned acquisition of U-Mobile's assets, signaling the regulator's intention to make infrastructure sharing mandatory. Safaricom must submit to the authority for approval a framework of hosting mobile virtual network operators, indicating the numbers to be hosted in timelines, the CAK had said in its letter to the telecoms operators. So interesting times, I'm sure. Equity Bank is up 4.065% so far this year, trades on a trading P of 8.914, and accelerated its full-year earnings per share 10.122%. Safaricom closed at a record high of 12.75 yesterday, plus 17.511% in 2014, and investors are evidently thinking they kicked on from what was a 44.8% profit after tax acceleration at the first half stage. At the first half stage, I did an interview with Bob. That link is on YouTube, and I took a photograph, which I quite like, as he released his results. Kenya Airways expects to return to a full-year profit, its commercial director said on Thursday. It's expanding its fleet with 9 Boeing 787 Dreamliners due for delivery by July 2015. They've launched Jambo Jet. The airline is about to embark on a very strong growth path, said commercial director Gerald Clark, as the carrier looks to rebound from a pre-tax loss of $124.97 million in the year which ended in March 2013. Its results are due on June 12. Kenya's first budget airline, Jambo Jet, takes its name from the Swahili for hello, Jambo, and aims to carry 600,000 passengers in its first year. Clark told a news conference in Nairobi that Kenya Airways had also signed a marketing and code-sharing partnership with South African budget airline Kulula.com, owned by Comair. And I think that's a good idea. And Clark said Kenya Airways would seek similar tie-ups with other low-cost carriers across the continent. The share price is down 0.766% this year, but I think that the fact that he's steering the market to a full-year profit is going to be helpful. I'll put up that photograph I liked of President Kenyatta trying out the flat bed, with Dr. Titus Naikuni having a quiet chuckle on the new Dreamliner. I'll put up the link for the interview I did for the Mindspeak session with Titus, where he really resonated with everybody. The Interior Secretary Joseph Ole Lenku has sensationally linked leaders opposed to the police crackdown in Eastleigh to tax evasion activities in the area. Fielding questions in a live radio interview with Easy FM, the Cabinet Secretary claimed the leaders were behind tax evasion cartels in Eastleigh. Then I went back to some verbatim transcripts from Makaburi, who was assassinated not too long ago. And he said every time there's a killing, it wakes more of them up. Now they are boys going to the mosque with daggers. One day they will bring guns, said Makaburi, which means graveyard in Swahili. In The Economist, they're writing, for all his precautions with cameras and not leaving his home, he also relished martyrdom. The jihad is a tree, he said. The more blood you spill, the more it will grow. Makaburi got his nickname for threatening to disinter the graves of Sufi Muslims whose burial rites clashed with his literalist reading of the Quran. The High Court has stopped the CMA from clearing the Rio Vipinga takeover. And this is because Vanya Investment Pool successfully applied before Justice Weldon Correa that the takeover timetable be suspended on the grounds that its revised bid of 80 shillings per share was rejected by the regulator for allegedly being filed outside the deadline. CMA had targeted to complete the takeover by the end of June. VIP accuses CMA of denying it a chance to vary its earlier offer of 55 shillings a share. The Kenya shilling was around this 86.50 level where it's been for quite a while. The Nairobi all-share is just 0.4345% below a record high from the 26th of March. That's up 5.64% this year. That was all about Safaricom. yesterday, and the NSE 20 remains negative 0.974% for the year. Once again, thank you for stopping by. I'm deeply grateful.